Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Scott Johnson here, and we are going to be doing another Tuttle Twins book reading today. These books, if you have not seen the first video, I bought these for my daughter a while back. They are extremely important because these teach the foundational principles of freedom that every child in America should understand. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing you these readings in a way to where you guys can just listen to them together, kind of watch this video, enjoy, and even ask questions afterwards to see, what you guys learned. Honestly, when I first got them, I read them all in like 12 hours because I needed to sleep. But I got them at 4 on Saturday and read them until the afternoon on Sunday. Got through all 12 of them, and they're absolutely fantastic. So today we are going to do a reading of the book The Law by Connor Boyack. I highly recommend that you purchase these books if you do like them. You can purchase them by going to the TuttleTwins.com. So what we'll do is we'll begin our reading, and my daughter Coraline is here as well. Show everyone. Hi. If you'd like to sit with me, you can. Otherwise, you can do your schoolwork. Homeschooling. Gotta love it. All right, so we are going to read The Law by Connor Boyack. Ethan and Emily Tuttle were happy 9-year-old twins who loved learning new things. They were brother and sister, but they were also good friends. They liked doing things together. One day in school, their teacher, Miss Minor, taught the students about wisdom. Mrs. Minor said that wisdom is when a person knows important and true things. For their homework, Ethan and Emily had to interview someone who was wise. They were supposed to ask a wise person to teach them about something very important. Both of them immediately thought of their next-door neighbor, Fred. Fred was an older man who grew up in France. He was like a grandpa to Ethan and Emily and often taught them new things. They enjoyed talking to each other while the twins played in their backyard and Fred worked in his garden. You have a really nice tree house there. I need to make one of those. Fred seemed to know a lot of interesting stuff. The twins could ask Fred almost anything, like how clouds got their shapes, or how gasoline makes a car engine run, or how hummingbirds seem to float in the air. He seemed to have an answer for every question. He would be the perfect person for the interview. After school, Ethan and Emily dropped their things off at home and hugged their mom. They gathered up some notebooks and pencils and ran across the lawn to Fred's house. The twins knocked on his door, and Fred opened it, greeting them with a large grin. How are my favorite neighbors? Asked Fred. The twins smiled back. They liked being the favorites. What can I help you with today? Fred asked them. We're learning about wisdom in Mrs. Minor's class, Ethan replied. We're supposed to interview someone who has it, Emily said. I see, said Fred, who chuckled as he realized why they came to him. And you think that I can help you? You bet, Emily said. Will you help us? Ethan asked eagerly. Mrs. Minor said that you should teach us about something very important. Well, I can try, Fred said as he turned around. I think I know just what to talk with you about. Follow me. Emily, the more energetic of the twins, leaped through the doorway. Ethan walked in behind her as they followed Fred upstairs to his office. It was like being in a library with bookshelves all around the room. There were also stacks of overflowing books piled everywhere. Fred clearly liked to read a lot. Readers are leaders. Side note. Have a seat, kids, Fred said, pointing to the couch. I want to help you understand what I think is very important. Fred reached up high with one hand to pull down a book. It's something that affects every person every day, he told them. The Tuttle twins were curious. What could it be, they wondered. Ethan was very clever and liked trying to figure things out. He asked if it might be something about food, since we all eat every day. Emily had a creative imagination and had a different idea. I'll bet it's about the sun, she said, trying to guess. Those things are important. But I have something else in mind, said Fred. What is it? Ethan asked excitedly. He was getting more curious by the minute. Fred held out the book he had taken off the shelf. This, Fred told them. Ethan and Emily read the title of the book, The Law. They couldn't quite pronounce the author's name, Friedrich Bastiat. My parents named me after this man, explained Fred. He taught people many important ideas about government. The twins glanced at each other with a look of confusion on their faces. The law affects us every day? Emily asked, looking up at Fred. That's what you think is important? Ethan asked, folding his arms and furrowing his brow. Are you sure? He said while he wrote down the law in his notebook. It's absolutely important, Fred said, and I bet by the time we're done, you will agree. Ethan still wasn't convinced. He was used to learning about interesting things like sharks or Venus flytraps or rockets. Our uncle is a police officer, Emily told Fred. I think he works with the laws. Yes, he does, Fred agreed. When people think of the law, they usually think of speeding tickets or putting criminals in jail. But it's much more than that, he said. You, me, and every other person has something called rights. Coraline, close that door, please. Thank you. You, me, and every other person has something called rights, he explained. Emily wrote, We have rights, in her notebook. Sorry for the background noise. I'm actually outside in the mountains. Having rights means that there are some things I can do and nobody else is allowed to stop me, Fred explained. Like playing with my toys? Ethan wondered aloud. Sure, Fred said. Or talking about things you want, or spending time with your friends, or going to church, Fred told them. While you two are still children, your parents are responsible to teach you and help you to use your rights in a good way, he said. But not when I'm all grown up, Emily said, standing up on her tiptoes to be taller. That's right, Fred replied. As adults, nobody else should stop you from using your rights. You'll be responsible for yourselves. Ethan wondered what he and Emily would look like as grown-ups. What would they do with all of their rights? I know you and your family go to church, Fred said. Ethan and Emily nodded. Think of rights this way. God gives us our lives, and he gives us our ability to think, learn, and act. God also gives us the ability to know what things are right or wrong, he told them. Ethan's eyes lit up. That's called your conscience, he said in a loud voice. That's exactly right, Ethan, Fred told him. He was happy to see that they were beginning to understand. Ethan wrote, We have a conscience in his notebook after Fred helped him with the spelling. Emily wrote, Our rights are from God, in hers. God gave us these things, and we have the responsibility to preserve and develop them, he said. Fred looked serious when he began to say, We also need to protect them. From bad guys? Emily asked, as she held her clenched fist in the air. Exactly right, Fred replied, smiling. Since people want to protect their rights and stop the bad guys, they group together. We often call this type of group a government, he said. Emily and Ethan locked arms and ran around the room, punching and kicking in the air. So, the government fights the bad guys, right? Ethan asked. He was imagining government agents in superhero costumes. Oh, let me show you the picture first. That's the idea, Ethan. But it doesn't always work out that way, Fred told them. In many cases, the bad guys can become a part of government. They stopped punching and kicking. Their jaws dropped open in disbelief. There are bad guys who are part of the government? How can that be? Wondered Emily. Bad guys in government don't wear capes or look like villains, Fred said. They look normal and say things a lot of people like, he explained. Emily wrote, "Bad guys can be in government," in her notebook as a reminder. If there are bad guys in government, what do they do? Ethan asked for their next interview question. That's an important question, Ethan, noted Fred, as he looked out the window. Let's go out to my garden so I can explain. It was a sunny afternoon, and the breeze felt wonderful. Ethan always liked exploring new things in the outdoors. Emily liked chasing butterflies and birds. I like chasing butterflies, birds, and lightning bugs, too. Those are fun. Fred led them over to the raised garden boxes he worked on each day. He was growing tomatoes, corn, peppers, and zucchini, among other things. Do you see my prized tomatoes here? Fred asked. Mrs. Lopez across the street really enjoys these whenever I take her some. Those tomatoes look amazing. Fred plucked a juicy red tomato off its vine and held it out towards the twins. What would you think if she were to take one of my tomatoes without asking? He questioned. Well, that would be wrong, of course, said Emily, matter-of-factly. Their parents had always taught them that stealing was wrong. Shouldn't her conscience tell her to stop? Ethan thought out loud. Definitely, Fred replied. Taking that tomato with her mask on. She made sure they didn't know who she was. Now, imagine that Mrs. Lopez asks your police officer uncle to help her get one. What would you think if he came and took my tomatoes to give to Mrs. Lopez? Ethan suspected that this was a trick question. Well, that would still be wrong, he said cautiously. Even if it was somebody from the government doing it? He asked Emily. Wrong is wrong, no matter who does it, she simply said. That's exactly right, Fred proudly replied. Ethan wrote down, stealing is always wrong. You two are learning something that many people don't understand, he said. Remember how we all have rights, and that we form governments to protect those rights? So the police officer is taking the tomatoes to give to her. Wrong is still wrong. Yep, Emily said as she interlocked arms with her brother, ready to fight the bad guys. If something is wrong for us to do, it's wrong for the people in government to do, Fred told them. Ethan and Emily both nodded. Wrong is wrong no matter what, Emily said. Fred's cat Dusty had followed the group outside and began to make purring sounds. Ethan patted Dusty and asked, Do bad guys in government take your things, Fred? Let's go into the kitchen so I can explain that, Fred said. The twins raced to be the first inside. Ah, now Ethan's running too. He wasn't running before. Fred opened the door to his large pantry. It had many shelves full of food. It was like being inside a grocery store. I store extra food in here so I can help people who are hungry, said Fred. Emily liked all the colorful boxes of cereal. Ethan was trying to count how many cans of chili Fred had. Sometimes I make meals for families when their dad loses their job. Or when the mom has a new baby, Fred told them. That seems really nice, Emily commented. But what does it have to do with government? Asked Ethan. Well, nothing, Fred stated. I help people because I want to. But the government forces me to help people too. Is that really so bad? Emily asked. Lots of sick or hungry people need our help, right? It's very true. Lots of sick or hungry people do need help. If you haven't done it in a while, talk to your parents about going to the local food bank and volunteering there. And the best thing to donate to a food bank is actually money, because a lot of the canned food gets thrown away. But if you give them money, they can buy a lot of food, even with $1 from a store, when it's right before it goes bad. And we're talking fresh food. Remember my question about your police officer uncle taking my tomatoes for Mrs. Lopez? Fred responded. The twins nodded. It was always wrong to steal, they remembered. Just like that, the bad guys in government take my things and give them to others without my permission. Sometimes they take my things to keep for themselves, or give away to their friends instead of helping the needy, Fred told them. They sound like pirates, Ethan said, imagining Fred walking the plank at the point of a sword. Arrgh! Fred chuckled. Yes, Ethan, pirates steal things. That's called plunder. And if bad guys in government do it, we call that legal plunder. And there are laws that let bad guys in government plunder like pirates? Emily asked. If a law lets a government do something I'm not allowed to do, then it's not a true law, Fred said. I'm going to repeat that part. If a law lets the government do something I am not allowed to do, then it is not a true law. As the most important line in this book. True laws protect people and their property from plunder, Fred explained. When true laws exist and are respected, people work hard to improve their lives and they work peacefully with others. Everyone prospers together and is happier. Ethan wrote down, true laws protect people. Fred continued, when there isn't any legal plunder, people rely on the kindness and service of others for things that they need. Like Fred with his pantry full of food. There's a little contract there, too. They use contracts in business. That's really important to remember. It helps to protect the people who are doing business together. But when the laws let people plunder, it turns everyone against each other, Fred said. Everyone wants to take instead of give. Some people stop working hard and begin looking to the government to take care of them instead. Again, some people stop working hard and begin looking to the government to take care of them instead. When this happens, the government begins to control everything. They like to control things, Fred told the twins. Then, who stops the bad guys if they're in government? Emily wondered aloud. Excellent question, Fred said, snapping his fingers. Let's head back upstairs for the answer. Fred walked back to his office and picked up his copy of the law again. When the government does bad things, it's hard to fight back because they're very powerful, Fred said. Being bullied by a kid at school is bad, but imagine if all the teachers and the principal were bullies, he continued. I forgot to show you the picture. Pretty. Here, show them your wolf. This is a wolf made out of stone and leaves and rocks from up here in the mountains. I would probably run away from school, Ethan replied. So would I, agreed Fred. He handed the book to his interviewers. And so we fight back with ideas, said Fred, like the ones in this book, like the ones I've been teaching you about just now. So we fight back against the government controlling things with ideas. And the things Fred has been teaching us. You know, Fred's originally from France. And that's where Friedrich Bastiat is from as well.
Sounds like it.
It does. If I knew how to do an accent, I would, but I can do an Irish accent, but I can't do French. Remember that you two are special, he told the twins. You have rights, and so you also have responsibilities. You should help people if they need something, but the law shouldn't force you to. Emily wrote, "We should help people" in her notebook. That makes sense, she said, but why don't more people know about it? That's what wisdom is all about, Emily. We each have to learn important lessons that we use in our lives and then teach to others, Fred said. Again, that's what wisdom is all about, Emily. We each have to learn important lessons that we use in our lives and then teach to others. That's what books like this help us do, he told the twins, pointing to the copy of the law they were still holding. I'll hold this a little longer so you can see what they wrote. They're writing some really important things in there. This is probably one of the best interviews I've seen in a long time. We have rights. Our rights are from God. Bad guys can be in government, and we should help people. It's what wise people throughout history have done, and now you can help your friends and family learn about it too, Fred suggested. Fred said they could borrow his book, even though they didn't know a lot of the words in it. Maybe your parents would enjoy reading it, he told them. He also gave them a jar of his prized tomatoes to take home. As they were walking back to their home, Ethan had a great idea and suddenly stopped. He whispered his idea to Emily, who smiled and nodded. The twins had a plan. What are those sneaky Tuttle twins gonna do? Looking both ways first, they crossed the street and knocked on the door of the nearby house. Mrs. Lopez opened the door, happy to see the twins. "We brought you a present, Mrs. Lopez," Ethan and Emily said in unison. They handed the prized tomatoes to her with smiles from ear to ear. We wanted to share with you, and nobody made us do it," Ethan explained. "You Tuttle twins are very kind and wise beyond your years," Mrs. Lopez said. To thank them for their good deed, she offered them each a homemade cookie. They felt happy that they had learned some wisdom that day. And they have to have been happy that they got the cookie, too. I mean, I love cookies. The end. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions, and these are something that you can go over with your parents as well. So you may need to watch the book again, but here are some things that you guys can talk about. So why is it important to listen to your conscience? Feel free to pause it after each question, and that way you guys can answer together. Number 2, is it always wrong to take something from another person without their permission? Number 3, what rights do you have? Number 4, if bad guys can be in government, how can we know who they are? And when we know who they are, what can we do about it? Number 5, what are some examples of laws that allow for the government to plunder us? It's a great question. It's a good question. And finally, the last question, what are some examples of true laws that protect us? Now, I want to help you with the true law part, but remember, a true law is something, give me a second, where is it? If a law says that, I'll tell you what, I can just recite it. If a law says that the government can do something and you cannot, that is not a true law. Thank you so much for taking the time to read through the Tuttle Twins with me. This, again, is The Law by Connor Boyack. He graduated from Brigham Young University and is, I guess this might be his Libertas Press. Highly recommend you go to thetuttlетwins.com and purchase these books, especially for your kids. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm not the most knowledgeable. Connor is. But I definitely love discussing discussing these topics with you guys, and hope to talk to you soon.